Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm excited to sit down and play with the brand new Makeup by Mario palette. So this is the new Ethereal Eyes Moonlight palette. I just got my palette in, so I wanted to do a demo, first impressions, and give you guys my thoughts on this new launch. I just want to jump right into it. If you're new here, I hope you stick around and subscribe. If you like these trying new makeup and brand new product first impressions videos, give this video a thumbs up. I will link this down below as well as all the other makeup that I'm wearing when I finish my makeup, and let's go ahead and get into it. So before we get into the demo, I do like to talk about the palette, the price, and show you swatches to see what we're working with. So this is the brand new Makeup by Mario Ethereal Eyes Eyeshadow Palette Moonlight Edition. This is available now. I will link it down below and on the screen, and it is $68. This is described as an iconic moonlight-inspired palette with 12 universal neutral shades in 4 different finishes to create the most versatile ethereal looks yet. It is also cruelty-free. It has a 12-month shelf life. Now, in terms of where it was made in the USA, assembled in the Dominican Republic. So this is what the palette outside looks like. It has a plastic, I want to say, feel. It's very similar to the original Ethereal Eyes. I feel like the size is almost identical, but I will say that the original is a little bit more weighted, maybe even a little bit thicker overall, but they do look very, very similar. So this is the cool toned sister to the original. The inside looks like so. I have not even put my grubby little fingers in there to swatch, but if my camera would focus, hold please. I went ahead and turned down my camera brightness so you can hopefully see. Really, it's a pretty neutral palette overall, except for this one matte kind of blue shade that really makes it look a little bit different. But so here's a side-by-side of the original versus the new one. You can see that they are completely different in tone. Even though they're both neutral palettes, the original was definitely warmer with more peachy kind of tones, and then the new one is definitely cooler. I'm gonna go ahead and throw up some swatches with my lighting down so you can see, but everything swatches really, really well. I feel like the mattes swatch really pigmented. Like there's no skipping, no patchiness. I'm curious how this compares to the original. I know that the original was sort of polarizing. People seemed to love it or they had issues with it. I thought that it was really beautiful, but I have to say that the mattes I found to be a little hard to work with. I felt like they were so powdery and almost like creamy thick that they kind of like dust away and then grab in other areas. The shimmers feel identical when I just swatch them next to each other, but the mattes, I don't know. It seems like in the new palette, just from dipping my finger in, the mattes feel a little bit harder pressed, maybe a little bit less powdery or dusty. So I do want to try that and kind of see if I notice a difference in terms of the formula when I'm actually using it. But the color story is definitely different. This is definitely way, way, way more cool toned. You do still have the option to be neutral, but when you're looking in here, I mean, this is a cool toned color. This blue, of course, this, and then the shimmers as well. Most of them are leaning like taupey gray. So that's kind of the overview of the palette, but I want to zoom you in and let's go ahead and start applying. All right, so I'm actually going to start off with the black shade in here. I want to try a different technique. I saw a tutorial on Instagram, not with this palette, but with another palette that I thought was so beautiful. So I'm just going to use a flat brush and I'm going to use this to kind of do a wing to start. I didn't set the lower portion of my lid. Look at the creasing already. I don't know how people don't set their makeup, but because I want this to really grab on once I start layering. So I'm just going to first create a wing with this shadow and then I'm going to build upon that. So starting to just create that shape, and hopefully with not setting, I won't have as much fallout and it will be more intense. This black is intense just off my first impression, so that is nice. So starting there and then just pulling out, and then I always seem to mess up the corner, but it's not a problem because we can just kind of clean it up and keep kind of tweaking until I get the shape that I want. Next, I'm gonna jump into this dark blue shade, and I'm just gonna use a Rephr 02. And because I didn't set my lid, I'm hoping that this really pops, not pops, but has the depth that I'm looking for. This seems really pigmented, just like the black shade. So I'm pressing this on top of my lid. That is really, really intense. And I'm first just trying to get the map where I want it. So when I get out here, I'm using more of the end of the brush. Okay, so next I'm gonna take a clean brush, and I just want to very, very, very lightly go over the edge of that shade. And I'm just softening it very, very lightly. And then I'm gonna jump into this light gray shade. Well, it's not light, but this mid-tone, really cool gray color. And I want to blend all on the edges here. Next, I'm actually gonna take this really kind of light shade here, see if this will give me more what I'm looking for. I just want to soften around that depth. And then I am gonna go back in with that blue and reinforce before we go in with any sort of shimmers. Okay, so next I wanna go in with one of the shimmers. I'm gonna use this shade just because I want it to really pop. These are very, very silky. They almost feel like they have a silicone in them, and they're very thin. So not a ton comes off when you touch them, but they're very impactful on the eyes. So you can see just how beautiful and reflective that is. So I'm just going to apply this all over the lid, and I kind of want this to be grungy, and it doesn't have to be perfect. So I'm just applying that all over, and then you can go back in with a brush and just lightly go around the edges. And then I want to take the really beautiful, this is kind of like an iridescent shifting shade, and I want to use this on my brow bone, kind of just on the outsides of the eye, to just give it a really fun vibe. So I'm just sweeping this above the brow, and then I'm going to go back in with that brush and just kind of blend. And just to brighten a little bit, I am gonna take the lightest matte shade and see if I can kind of mix it with that iridescent. I just want that kind of like grungy wet look, but also the toppers in here are not fully pigmented. And just to see, I am going to tap some of that iridescent on the lid too. I don't want too much because I want it to be that grungy, like gunmetal color still. And then I am just gonna go back in with the black on a really tiny brush, and I just wanna reinforce that wing, more so on the outer corner. Okay, so I think I'm gonna leave the eye there. I'm going to clean up the fallout, do the other eye, throw some lashes on, and then we will finish the rest of my makeup and get into the lower lash line. So I will be back once I get all of that done so we can finish this look. Okay guys, so I went ahead and did the rest of my makeup, but I wanna finish off the eyes because they're a little top heavy at the moment. So I'm gonna go in with this Huda Beauty Creamy Kohl Longwear Liner in black. I can't find my Nabla, which is my favorite. So I'm gonna use this to tightline. And then I am going to run this on the lower lash line, like in the waterline, a little bit below that as well. And then take that smudger brush and just lightly smudge this and connect to where we have that kind of sharp wing. And I am going to take it down a little bit more on this outer edge. And this is just going to be kind of like a base. Next, I am going to try, I don't know if this is gonna work, but take a little bit of this brown shade down here. I wanna see if I can get a little bit of warmth in this look. If it doesn't look right, I'll just go in with like the black. And I'm just going to really lightly smoke this right on that liner. Subtle, but just a little bit of warmth because everything else is really like blue, which blue isn't, you know, like my favorite shade on my eyes, but I wanted to really test this out and I knew that people probably wanted to see the blue. And to smoke just a little bit more, I am gonna go into this lighter shade with a fluffier brush. And I wanna just sweep this underneath just to diffuse this a little bit. I might have to go back in and reinforce some of that, but I do feel like, not to spoil my final thoughts, but this palette, I feel like the mattes are much easier to work with than the original palette. The mattes in here just don't feel as chalky or powdery. So I don't know, I would have to compare the ingredients, but I'm gonna go back in with that brown, by the way. I do feel like this is much easier to work with than the original mattes in the Ethereal palette. So I wonder if there was some slight formula changes or maybe even just pressed differently. Next, I wanna dip into this iridescent shade again, and I wanna see if this will kind of add a little, oh yeah, pop to the inner corner. That's really pretty. And then just because I want to try, I think I am going to grab a little bit of this, see if this adds anything to the lower lash line. I don't know if this is gonna, it's not really showing up how I wanted it to. Okay, I think I'm gonna go back into that first shimmer just to add a little bit more. I'm also gonna use that same shimmer with a damp brush. See if I can get, yeah, it shows up a little bit better, but just to have some extra pizzazz. I'm also going to just add a little bit of mascara. All right, guys, so this is the makeup look I came up with using the new Makeup by Mario palette, and I wanna go over my thoughts. So this look is definitely much more blue than I would use in my daily life, but I did want to jump into that navy shade because it really does kind of stand out in this palette, and I know that blues can be hard to formulate and hard to work with. I have to say that I feel like this was easier to work with for me personally than the original Ethereal palette. The shimmers in here, or the, I guess, toppers or glitters, I don't know, it's like a dry but thin formula, glittery but sophisticated glitter. They don't have, you know, a creaminess to them, but when you put your finger in, you get a lot of payoff, just really easy to apply. You do get fallout, but it really doesn't need like a glitter glue or a setting spray, so that is a pro with these. And I feel like these shimmers or glitters are the same in both palettes, but for some reason I felt like the mattes in here were easier to work with than the original. Just not as chalky, they didn't blend away to nothing. They feel harder pressed maybe, or just, I don't know, thinner overall. So I found this to be really easy to work with. I had like no patching and no struggles at all. And for a look look that is this deep and complex. I am sort of surprised by that. I really typically struggle like on the outer edge where my microblading is, and I didn't have those struggles with that. So I feel like the formula is very easy to work with. Of course, this is a neutral palette leaning cool. If you were to cover these up, you kind of do have like your basic neutrals, but then you do have this standard metallic shade that is definitely like a gunmetal color. And then you've got these three tones that are more cool. The black obviously is black, which I think is nice and helpful because the original didn't have a black, and then the blue, and then this is definitely like a really cool toned gray. So you can do a neutral look or you can do more of a cool tone vibe like this. But I really wish that maybe we omitted like one, I say we, like me and Mario, you know, we were in the lab making this palette, I wish, but I wish that one of these was maybe omitted because when you swatch them, there are little variations, but on the lid, I just felt like it almost just looks like a gunmetal glitter. I don't know if you're gonna get like a difference because I went in with the more peachy tone and I really didn't see that on the lid. So I wish that maybe one of these was just like a totally different color or just one of them omitted, and maybe include something like this full body metallic up here where there's actually pigment behind it. We need a light full body metallic, if that makes sense. So I would have liked to see one of these swapped out. I do think that the iridescent shade is really beautiful, but again, it's going to give you that like blue sort of shift. And I just don't know every day how many people are going to be like reaching for that or the navy in here. But if you do cover those, you know, two shades up, you really have a very neutral palette. I will say that the shadows do also seem to apply deeper on the eyes, which could be a good or bad thing depending on, you know, what your preference is. But I do think this is a well curated palette. I think it's really beautiful. I don't know if this is like you need it or, you know, everything's going to fall apart. I know people are like all into the hype. I think this is definitely though an elevated version of his first palette. I just think that I prefer personally the color story of this, but again, you know, that's just me and my skin tone and my preferences. If you are deeper complected, I think you're gonna get along with this one because there is a lot of depth, a lot of pigment, really a great palette for like a smoky eye. So I'm quite impressed with it. I actually like the formula better than the original, but I like the color story and the original better. So I hope this video helped you guys. I would love to know what you think. I can do more looks with this palette. I feel like I really went into the blue territory, and this would not be like what I would do, you know, every day, but I really try to push myself when I'm doing these videos because I want to try as many shades as possible and really kind of make an intense look so you can see what the palette can do. So of course I will link the palette down below as well as all the other makeup that I'm wearing. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up. I really appreciate it, and I hope you stick around and subscribe. Do let me know if you picked it up, what you think of it, and what you think of this look. As always, thank you guys again so much for watching. I'll see you in the next video.